Again, good evening, parents and guardians of the class of 2025. Welcome to tonight's course selection question and answer session. The meeting is a follow-up to Mr. Salutieri's presentation that was emailed last week and again over the weekend. My name is Brian Bodner. I'm an assistant principal here at DHHS and will be the class administrator for your child's grade when they enter Daniel Hand High School in the fall. I speak for the high school, faculty, and staff when I say that we look forward to working with your children. I am joined tonight by our high school's principal, TJ Salutieri, and our school's other assistant principal, Melanie Witcher, as well as our department leads and coordinators. I will begin the question and answer session by responding to a few questions that were sent to me in advance of tonight's meeting. After I finish responding to these questions, I will be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have about the course selection process. Those questions that I am unable to answer, I will obviously ask those who are joining us to answer those with their expertise. When asking a question, please unmute yourself or type a question in the chat room and Mr. Salutieri will read them aloud. The first question that I received in advance of tonight's meeting was, how will my child, who is a remote learner, receive a course registration form, and how and where will they be expected to return it? Polson will email a blank course registration form to remote students, and students will be expected to email back to Mr. Paris via email by Friday, February 5th. If they are unable to or struggle with emailing the form back, they may physically drop it off at the school. Polson will communicate this process again with students. The next question that I received was, when students select classes in the coming weeks, are they doing so for just the first trimester or for the entire 2021-22 academic year? Students are providing us, with the course request sheets with their requests for the entire school year. Please realize that it's impossible to select what particular courses will occur in one schedule during which trimesters, outside of potentially requesting a study hall during a specific trimester. Mr. Salutieri in his video explained that there is an ability for a student to select a study hall if they so choose during a particular trimester. But outside of that, we are unable, for instance, to say that you would have PE or that you would have math or science in a specific trimester. That is all part of the scheduling algorithm when all of the requests are entered into our computer and sorted through. The third question that I received was, will remote students have the ability to log into the Zoom call with the guidance counselors on January 22nd while the in-person students are viewing it? Yes, they will be able to. However, it's important to note that these meetings have been moved from January 22nd to next Tuesday, January 26th. This change has been made due to the number of students right now that are home learning remotely. Students will be able to join the Google Meet. The link to the meeting will be shared with remote learners by their Polson teachers. But again, the guidance department moved that meeting to January 26th, which is next Tuesday. At this time, we are open to taking any questions that you may have. Again, if you have a question, please unmute yourself, as everyone at this time is muted. And again, we will answer your question, and you may also, in the chat room, it is visible to Mr. Salutieri. If you have a question, that you may type it there and he will read it aloud. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Helen Strobel. We picked quite a few of the CTE classes for my son, and I was wondering, like, how many are there that can be picked for the school year? Like it's, yeah. I think we're not overly over the credits that are suggested, but I'm just curious.
Well, the course request form that goes home will list the areas where students have to put in required selections. And then after that, there will be several slots for them to be able to request, again, as you said, not only alternates, but courses that they would like to take as electives. A student during their time at Daniel Hand is required to take a minimum of 1.0 credits in CTE. If you have additional questions about what the CTE department offers, Mr. Grenier, who is our department coordinator, is in this meeting, can certainly answer those. Mr. Grenier, I'll just ask, is there anything that you'd like to add about your course offerings?
Not specifically. I mean, you already mentioned that students need 1 credit of CTE classes to graduate.
Okay. And I will add again that, again, a student has a choice to put a minimum of 3 elective choices on the sheet. Because of the fact that they're 9th graders, as Mr. Salutieri explained in his video, that the computer algorithm, and it's the same at every high school, will always, if there were students in each grade selecting the same course, the older student would have priority first. But I will say that I think our freshmen get many opportunities to take electives and great opportunities. If your child is certainly interested in taking our CTE courses, it's not a bad thing to list certainly 2 to 3 of those, as well as perhaps even 1 as an alternate. And that would be true in any content area which your child, that I would say to everyone, is interested in.
Mr. Bodner, I have a few questions in the chat for you, if you're ready for those.
Yes.
Okay, the first question is in regards to the PE/health requirement. And it sounds like they just need 1 semester per year, which, don't forget, we are on trimesters, not semesters. And is that accurate? So the question is, do they need 1 course in PE health per year?
Well, a student needs to earn 1 credit of PE, and they also need to earn a credit of health. And the way that our freshman, sophomore, and junior PE and health classes, freshman, sophomore PE classes are designed is a student earns in those classes a 1/4 credit PE, a 1/4 credit of health. So they would, at the end of sophomore year, have a 1/2 credit in each. Student would then be required during their junior and senior year, one of those 2 years, to take our junior senior health class, which would be a 1/2 credit. That would fulfill the health requirement. And for PE, the student would need to either take PE class during the 11th or 12th grade to earn the additional 1/2 credit of PE. They ultimately earn 1 credit in each area, in both PE and in health. But again, the first 1/2 credit in both areas are earned within the 9th and 10th grade in those 2 courses.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. And the next chat question, Jenna Guzzi, who's our world language coordinator, I think would be best to answer this question. This one's in regard to the newly instituted 1 credit foreign language requirement, or world language requirement, as we refer to it, to graduate. And this is a really good question. My child joined the district last year and had taken Italian in the former district. Will the 1 credit language requirement be a true intro course?
The answer is yes. Whether it's Spanish 1, French 1, Mandarin 1, or Latin 1, it is taught as if the student has never taken that language before. That being said, a lot of our students, particularly in Spanish, do have some knowledge of Spanish from the past, and the teacher does his or her very best to make sure that every student in the class is challenged while also not overwhelming students who are brand new to the language.
Great, Jen, thank you. The next, and if there's any follow-up questions, you could just keep adding to the chat, or you can just jump in after I read this last question that's currently in the chat. And Mr. Bodner, I believe this one is a general question more for you to respond to. Will students have the same class subject at the same time every day during the course of a trimester?
Same class, same subject every day. Can you repeat that, Mr.
Will
Salutary?
students, sure, will students have the same class subject at the same time every day during the course of a semester?
Okay, during the course of a trimester?
Yeah, excuse me.
Yes.
trimester.
So once the student receives their schedule, our periods do not rotate, they do not float. So your period one class would be your period one class for the entire trimester. Again, depending on the length of that course, that would also be the same case for if the course was a 1 credit class, then the student would have, if say again, the class fell in period one, they would have that course in 2 of our 3 trimesters as a 1 credit class meets for 2 of the 3 trimesters. If it were a 1.5 credit class, as we do have some of those courses as well, the student would for the entirety of the year have that class in that particular period. We do again have a 6-period schedule, as well as we offer music classes and what we call a period 7, which are performance-based classes that students audition for that meet after school. Those classes meet beginning approximately at 2:05 in the afternoon, and they conclude at 3 p.m. But once again, the classes do not move during, through the course of our schedule. They stay in the period of which the student begins the class.
And I have a few more in the chat box, so I'm going to read the next one. And Jenna Guzzi, this one relates to world language as well. This is for a student who did not grow up in the Madison Public School System. And the question is it recommended the student take Spanish 1 next year as a 9th grader if 8th grade was their first year taking Spanish?
I would say it depends a little bit on the district, and it's possible that Spanish 2 would be appropriate. I would recommend that parent email me directly, and we can set up a very simple email-based placement assessment where I essentially will email out a handful of questions in Spanish for the student to respond to, and that will give me a pretty good sense of what might be appropriate. And I think that's, fair to say for anyone, if you're not feeling confident about the placement, the appropriate placement for a student who's coming from a different district, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to set something up so that, we always adjust schedules after the fact if needed, but it's much easier on everybody if they're placed appropriately from the beginning.
Great, thank you, Jen. Mr. Bader, I'm going to keep going because the questions, we are appreciated and they keep coming in the chat box. Next question is a general question, and this person says she may have missed it right in the beginning. And it is the course request form for freshman year for the first trimester only or for the entire freshman year? Really important question for Mr. Bodner.
Yes, the course request form is for the entire year. So again, as I was saying, that it's impossible, we schedule the whole year at one time. You do have the ability though to specify, as Mr. Salutary highlighted in his video, many times a student, particularly one who plays a sport after school, likes to have during the season of their sport a study hall. So as he pointed out, you could request the study hall that corresponds with the first, second, or third trimester and list that specifically on your course request form. But when you make those choices, you are choosing courses for the year. Where they will fall in the student's schedule is an unknown. We do not hand schedule students. What we do is we enter all the requests into our system, and then I am deemed the quote master scheduler, and it is my job to continue to just keep moving courses through a maze of, again, we run approximately, I think about 270 courses, which some of those courses run as many as a dozen sections. So we're running many sections, we're moving those through. So again, it's just important that they make their choices for what they would like to take during their freshman year. And, hopefully they will get what they've requested. We do a great job with that. We typically meet around 93% of our students' requests at this time, which is an extremely high number. And if we're unable to meet their request and say your child does not get an elective that they really want to take next year, we would recommend that once the school year starts, that they share that with their guidance counselor, and their counselor could put them on a wait list, and if a spot were to open due to someone who is enrolled dropping the class, they could potentially get it at that time. And a lot of movement always occurs in high schools as students do change their schedules a lot in those first days. So I would say that not only with 4 years ahead of them, but an entire school year, they shouldn't overreact next fall if they see something right away that they didn't get. Try to see if they could get into it, but also remind them that their chances of getting that class will increase over time.
Great. And a good question that follows up, Mr. Bodner, regarding just how our schedule works with bridged courses, or what we also refer to as gapped courses. This one's specific to world language, Mr. Bodner, but I think you could answer it regarding, any course that meets for more than one trimester. The question reads, will the world language classes continue to be bridged between trimester 1 and 3, or will they be continuous, for example, trimester 1 and 2?
Okay. So all courses that are 1 credit courses have to be created in 3 different ways in order to meet students' requests efficiently. And we have to, a 1 credit class, again, based on its credit hours, meets for 120 days approximately, which is 2 trimesters. So the configuration of those courses is they would meet either trimesters 1 and 2, trimesters 1 and 3, or trimesters 2 and 3. So if we were building, just hypothetically, if I was building of any course in our school, say there were 9 sections running, and it was a 1 credit class, I would create 3 sections of each of those configurations, as that will best enable our students school-wide to be able to get the most of their choices that they want.
Great, thanks, Mr. Bodner. The next question I have in the chat is, and Mr. Grenier, I would suggest you respond to this question. Does a child have to choose an exploratory track in order to take those specific electives? Example, does a child have to indicate or express interest in restaurant and food services to take culinary classes? And the person who asked this question also mentioned that they understand how quickly some of our really popular electives fill up by the upperclassmen.
So to answer that question, each of those pathways, in this example, the restaurant and food service pathway, there's 4 different course offerings in that pathway. So the image in the program of studies shows a course in the middle. If you think of a donut, there's the intro course in the middle of the donut, and then the outer part of the donut are the other 4 different courses. So a student, an incoming freshman, it's recommended they take that intro level course, but due to scheduling and other scheduling needs, they could take some of the other courses in the outer part of the donut per se.
We love the donut reference, Mr. Grenier. Thank you. All right, continuing. Jenna Guzzi, this would be a question for world language. If a student has some proficiency in a specific language, can they test into a higher level class?
Absolutely. Yes, we don't want our students sitting in a class where they're feeling bored at all. So yes, just like people who are coming from a different district, I would recommend the parents just emailing me directly, and we can set up some type of a placement assessment.
Thank you. Mr. Bodner, do students get credits for the 7th period class that meets from 2:05 to just about 3:00 p.m.?
Yes, those courses earn credit, and again, those are all courses that students need to audition for.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. Next question, can you please explain the independent project?
The independent project is a course that we currently offer, and one that your children will be required to take before they graduate. It is part of our district's Portrait of a Graduate, and that is a course that will be available to the class of 2025 during their junior and senior years. It is a course where a student will be guided by a teacher who, to pursue an interest of theirs. It could be far-ranging from something that a student wants to research to that is based on a subject that they're passionate about, to it could be a community-based project that they work on outside of school and report back on. It could be to building, working with someone on construction and building something. It's really of their design, and an adult will help guide them through that. And it is something that, again, we've been offering for several years. Our students do end of course presentations. They would continue in some way to have a performance-based assessment at the conclusion of it, whether that would be a presentation, whether that would be some form of a report, but there would be a performance-based component at its conclusion, and they're quite impressive. I mean, the kids who have taken the course presently have been, very positive about it. Many of them have actually described it as being life-altering, that it's really helped them in many ways discover what they're passionate about, as well as, I think what it's like to truly be a self-guided learner. And it's an invaluable course, and it is one of the courses, again, that will compose the 1 credit requirement that students will need to fulfill in the class of 2025 in order to graduate. And the other course will be personal finance. And I'll just jump into that, being that we're talking about Portrait of a Graduate. And personal finance is a course that students can sign up to take starting in the 9th grade. I would honestly, like Mr. Salutieri said in his video, I wouldn't recommend myself, a student, probably taking that ideally until the earliest, the 10th grade, probably, again, more suited for a student in 11th and 12th grade. But the personal finance course is a 1 trimester course. And again, they do have the ability to take that course anytime, from 9th through 12th grade, but they will have to take that before they graduate.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. And this is a general question regarding course selection for the year. So based on the fact that students will be selecting courses for their entire freshman year, do the students get their full year schedule before the year starts, or just the first trimester schedule?
On the first day of school, students immediately in the first day of school report to our PAW groups, which is another fancy name for homeroom. And they go to their homeroom, their PAW group, initially at the start of the day, where they receive their schedule for the year.
Thank you. Mrs. Hawley, this question is probably most appropriate answered by guidance. The question is, do teachers and guidance counselors help the student choose classes, or is it up to the student to choose their classes with the parents' assistance?
All of the above. I would say the teachers definitely help, especially I know at Polson with math that they help and in the languages. But certainly the counselor is available. I am available to help if there are questions about courses. I know the middle school counselor may not be able to answer them. Chris, he may be able to, but you can certainly email me and I can help with selection. The counselors help with course selection all throughout high school too. So again, all of the above. Parent conversation is certainly important, teacher conversations, and then the counselors too.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bodner and Mrs. Stillman, I would guess this would be an appropriate question for you to respond. For the 7th period classes, for example, chamber orchestra and show choir, what's the timing and process? More specifically, when is that information, for example, audition requirements, communicated to the students?
Do you want me to take that one? Okay, so all the period 7 classes, like Mr. Bodner said, are audition only. And that all rolls out in the fall. So that's not something you have to worry about for scheduling right now. Mr. Gage actually, with the band program, met with some of the 8th graders today, as Mr. Soja and Ms. Bulik will be also meeting with them to kind of go over some offerings in more detail. But all those period 7 groups will have audition requirements come the fall. And that's something they should look out for, like the 1st or 2nd week of school.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Hawley, back to you for some math and science recommendations. When are the recommended math and science classes communicated to the students?
I know that the math teachers will fill out their course forms for the students prior to handing them their forms. As far as science, I believe it's done prior to as well. I don't know if Chris is still on here to give me that exact date. He may not be on here any longer. So I don't know when they're actually due back to them. So I can follow up if they want to email me. I'd be happy to get that information.
Great, and thank you, Mrs. Hawley. And just keep in mind, though, that information is communicated with students prior to the deadline for course selection, which is February 5th. And Mr. Granero, this is a follow-up question to the question along the exploratory courses. Could you be on a business track but take culinary courses or any other course?
Of course. Of course. The way we structured our course offerings, you could take any course based on your interests. The exploratory experience courses are strictly that. They're not tied to any specific track. But if a student has an interest, let's say, in robotics engineering, if they want to take that course to explore to see, they're more than welcome. They're not tied to a specific pathway.
Great, thank you. And Mrs. Aguzzi, world language. Will the current world language teachers recommend placement for 9th grade?
The current 8th grade teachers will make recommendations for 9th grade, yes. In rare occasions where an 8th grader is not taking a language for any reason, if they've had language previously at Polson, they can reach out to that Polson language teacher for a recommendation. Or if that's not possible for any reason, then I can help with placement.
Excellent, thank you. And Mr. Bodner, this is just a general question. When are core class selections due?
Core class selections would be due the same time as all the students' requests would come in, and that would be February 5th.
Excellent, thank you. And next question, Mrs. Bader, who's our English program coordinator. It appears that there is no leveling for 9th grade English. Is this accurate? And if so, can Mrs. Bader speak to the rationale and subsequent differentiation?
Sure, so that is correct. There is no leveling for 9th grade English. It's a good year for students to orient to high school English. That said, we do transition really nicely from Polson in that the kids are in a full workshop model still in 9th grade. So that is part of the rationale for the unleveling. Philosophically speaking, within that model, teachers should be able to meet students where they are in terms of book recommendations, small group instruction or enrichment instead. And then appropriate choices are made, that year for what will happen the following year. 10th grade is leveled and does look different in terms of what honors, in particular in terms of pacing, in terms of what honors has to offer. And then beyond that, they can begin to choose AP classes. So the latter for students, I think, is very important as they acclimate to classes.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bader. And Mr. Bodner, there's two questions. Let me read both of them because they do pertain to the fall sports season. And assuming things begin to normalize in the fall and sports resume, when would students find out about tryouts for those sports, then begin practicing in the summer? And then similar question, when do students find out about how they express an interest in being involved with a fall sport?
Okay. Our athletic department, which is led by our athletic director, Mr. Semple, he sends out communication over the summer regarding sports registration. If a student registers for a sport, they should at that point then be contacted by that coaching staff and would be informed of when practice or tryouts would begin. And again, that information does get sent home over the summer months. In addition to that, if we, return to normal in one way, or even if we don't, I think in one way or another, one of the things that we had been doing in recent years, we were unable to do it this past spring as we were full remote so unexpectedly, was we always did a club and athletic fair where kids would, come to hand and be able to, learn a little bit more about those groups. They would come over for about an hour with, half of their class, and they would receive an informative session from our students where they would be explained a lot of the ins and outs of high school and things that kids wish they knew when they were starting. And at the same time, we would have tables set up for our clubs and things. While I don't envision that right now being able to take place this year, with the fact that we are living in this, certainly I'm sure between Google Meet and things of that nature, that we'll be able to also share some additional information with the students in the spring. But that information, again, specifically regarding sports in the fall, would be communicated by our athletic department and by Mr. Semple over the summer.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. Next question is in regards to the 7th period courses that are audition only. And here's the question. If auditions for 7th period are in the fall, how do students know if they will receive those credits or enroll in another course to acquire the desired number of credits?
Well, I'll take the first part and then let Mrs. Stillman answer the next part. When it comes to the credit piece, because these are 7th period, our student schedule and the course requests that they send in do not involve the 7th period courses because of their nature. So the student will, and their counselor will work to ensure that they are carrying the required number of classes, which our Board of Education requires a student to be enrolled in a minimum of 6.5 courses a school year, and a student must earn, even in the 12th grade, 4.5 credits minimum during their 12th grade year, regardless of how many credits they previously earned in order to graduate. But most of our students earn far beyond that. That would really not impact that. Regarding, though, again, the process of auditioning and how that information is conveyed, I will let our music coordinator step in for a moment.
So the first week of school, there'll be a communication from the teachers up there for auditions. There will be parameters around those auditions, and that's how they've worked it. If there's a concern about them getting that fine arts credit in music, my suggestion would be to enroll in one of our other ensemble courses that happen during the day for the guaranteed credit. The 7th period are upper level ensembles, like we said, for audition only. If you want to speak further about it, I'm happy to take an email if I can answer any more questions.
Thank you. And just a quick clarifier, and we're not sure what it will look like. Show choir typically will have auditions prior to the end of the school year. So 8th graders would get that information and have times with Mr. Soja. I don't know what that's going to look like, in the current environment right now with COVID. At this point, I would say that's a definite no-go, but there's certainly potential. I would love to see, the person who asked me at the chat, when we start to get more normal, that will be exciting. When we get more normal, if that's the case, we'll send those communications out, and the 8th graders won't miss that information. We will over communicate that to you and to your children. But I don't, at this point, if you had to ask me, that's a next year, for our tryout, we will probably gather who may be interested, but I don't see us having the option to let 8th graders come over into our building, in the current COVID environment. But I do look very forward to that changing, hopefully in the very near future. So I have a few more questions. Keep them coming. These are excellent. This is a question from an 8th grade student, which is great. Will the students receive a hard copy of the program of studies, or is it only available online?
The program of studies is only available online.
Next question. I understand students can choose the elective classes they wish that they may be in different tracks, but do they have to choose a track?
I'm not sure if we're specifically talking about a particular department, but there's really no track with elective courses. Again, elective courses are what students are interested in or think that they may be interested in. It may just be more exploratory, that they're not really sure. It's something that, again, they're curious about. I would highly recommend, when choosing electives, to go about them that way and to look at things that your child is interested in with them, things that they may be passionate about. We offer, absolutely tremendous electives throughout our school. yeah, you could look on our website, you could look at just even a little bit that Mr. Salutieri shared in his presentation. But again, our art department, our CTE department, our world language department, and all of our core areas just offer an array of electives that are outstanding that, I think are the envy of a lot of our neighboring high schools, and really look through the program of studies to select those that are of high interest to your child.
Thanks, Mr. Bodner. Mrs. Hawley, this is a question about ECA, and if you want to explain what that is just briefly as you respond, here's the question. If you have a student interested in ECA, would they sign up as if they are not in and then re-register as they would only be AM students with core classes?
Okay, ECA is a arts program that our students can attend in New Haven. So they leave school early. They only come 4 periods during the day, and it is they do have to apply in order to attend the program. I would suggest, we've always suggested that the students select courses as if they're not in the ECA program. I would rather fill up their schedules with courses at hand. It's easier to take the courses away than to put them in later. So definitely sign up for classes as if the students are not in the program, and then we could again take them away and adjust the schedule once they are accepted.
Great, Jen, thank you.
May I add in, I apologize on that, just for the art
Sure,
department.
Suzanne,
Because
thanks.
I just wanted to let you know that if you have a son or a daughter who's interested in the arts and doing ECA, we have students that enroll in our art courses and attend ECA. So if they're in that process of decision making, to build on what Jen said, definitely sign up for what they're interested in, see what our art department has to offer, and we can help you with that decision.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Jenna Guzzi, good question about students taking more than one language. And here's the question. Do students entering with middle level experience in 2 languages, for example, Spanish and Latin, have the opportunity to continue to double up on languages? Is there a point at which students would be encouraged to choose just one of the 2 languages?
We absolutely have students who take multiple languages. It is unusual for a student to be able to take 2 languages for all 4 years. And we certainly encourage that for students who show an extreme interest in languages. There are many students who take, for example, 4 years of French, Mandarin, or Spanish, and take just a year or 2 of Latin because it's so supportive and across for SATs and sciences, everything. I like to say that you can do anything you want with a schedule, but you can't do everything you want with a schedule. So if you want to take 2 world language classes, you might not be able to also take music. You might not be able to also have a study hall. You might not be able to also take, all of the other electives that you want. So it really has to be balanced carefully, and it has to be something that the students are passionate about, so that they are able to get all of their other interests covered as well. But we absolutely have students who do it every year and who thrive in that situation.
Great, Jen, thanks. And Suzanne Gaskell, a question about an intro art class. Is there an intro art class that a freshman is likely to get in their schedule? And are there art classes a freshman is very unlikely to get in their schedule during their freshman year?
We have a number of course offerings, and again, I would direct your student to go in the area they're interested in. We do not have a single standalone foundational course that feeds all the others, but rather if your son or daughter is interested in drawing, you would start with a drawing 1 course. If their interest is perhaps in photography, you might consider darkroom to digital. If they're interested in animation, there's an animation course available. So we have a wide array of courses in the hopes that freshmen will choose the area they're interested in, and then they can build on those, or they could try some other standalone art course offerings over the course of their studies.
Excellent, thank you very much. So that at this point, there are no longer any more questions in the chat. So if you're typing any right now, take your time. But if anyone is, interested in just jumping in and asking a question, on a live Zoom that's being recorded and will be emailed out to the entire class of 2025 parents and guardians, feel free to jump in right now. But if you're more comfortable with a private chat, we'll hold for a couple of minutes and I'll certainly read any of the questions that come up. I will say, we've done this together, our group, for 8 years. These are some of the most thoughtful questions, and I think this format's actually working really well for our first time around. And we have just under 100 participants, which is a great turnout. So we do appreciate your time. And a couple more questions popped in. Excellent. And Jen Hawley, this one's a follow-up regarding ECA. Where might I find more info about ECA?
The counseling office at Polson should have information and contact information for the program.
And
otherwise, you can certainly email me, and I have an email as well.
Excellent, thank you. And Jenna Guzzi, this question is specific to Latin class. Can you please give a brief description of the Latin class?
Absolutely. So actually, I'm also going to say that our Latin teacher, Mr. Bryan, and our Mandarin teacher, Mr. Curran, created videos that are going to be shown to all 8th graders in the next week or so, because our 8th graders have a sense of what Spanish class looks like and what French class looks like, and how similar they are to each other, but Mandarin and Latin are both a little bit different. So they will be getting a video introduction from those 2 courses. The Latin course is taught in English, and it is based in vocabulary acquisition. He actually does units on English grammar in addition to Latin grammar. And in that way, the Latin course really supports better writing across the disciplines, as well as vocabulary acquisition for life, as well as for more specific standardized tests, and writing across the disciplines. It also helps students to become more analytic and detail-oriented readers as they zero in on language and vocabulary usage. They study the culture of Rome, as well as poetry and literature, and they do not speak in Latin other than to read what is written. It's based in translation.
Excellent, thank you, Jen. Mr. Bodner, here's a general question regarding graduation requirements. Are there statewide tests required for graduation? For example, in New York, there are statewide Regent tests requirements for the high school graduation.
No, there is not a statewide exit exam in Connecticut, but starting with the class of 2025, students are required to earn 1 more additional credit. Actually started with our sophomore class, my mistake, but it started with our current 10th grade class that they will need to earn 25 credits in order to graduate. Our current seniors and juniors only needed to earn 24. Part of that was the state requirement that high schools develop in school districts a portrait of a graduate of what skills and capacities we want our students to be able to demonstrate, model, exemplify by the conclusion of 12th grade. Our district this past school year through the spring had worked on that. We had started and thankfully had the bulk of the work done prior to the pandemic, and were able to wrap it up at that time. And with that, again, that additional credit requirement will require of this particular class is that before they graduate, they will, in addition to meeting the requirements that had already existed, they will also in addition need to take the half credit personal finance class and the half credit independent project class, but there is not a state exam.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner. All right, any other questions at this time? All right, so before Mr. Bodner just wraps up, I would just like to thank everyone. And Actually, I had one question jump in. Hold on one second. In Mr. Salutary's video, he suggested looking at course descriptions to see estimates of homework time. However, online course descriptions don't have that description. Where can we find that info? Mrs. Witcher, you want to take one? Not to put you on the spot.
Sure, no, I'll take one. So any class that has a significant, I guess I would say like a significant threshold of homework. So if we're talking about 45 minutes, if we're talking about an hour of reading in some of our AP classes, specifically in English, those will be listed. Every single individual course, if it doesn't say that there's a specific amount of time for homework, you can anticipate around that 30-minute mark. But the ones that require a significant amount of homework, those are the ones that are specified. So if you don't see it specified in there, it means it's not requiring 45 minutes or an hour plus of homework a night.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Witcher. So again, thank you to all the participants this evening. I also like to thank the administrators and coordinators. Obviously, your responses are really helpful. Mr. Bodner, you want to wrap this up and just mention the recording and sending this out shortly?
Yes, again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. As I had stated at the start of the meeting, we have recorded this meeting and we will hopefully be able to get that out in the next couple of days. And that will likely be sent out, through a Polson email. So you can look for it there if there's anything you want to refer back to. I would encourage you that, once you are finished with the course selection process, to really take advantage of our website with your student. And certainly there's quite a while until they will actually matriculate to Daniel Hand next year, but it would be worthwhile to look at our clubs and activities and things that we offer here. Many of those are still meeting virtually and offer students a large array and a large variety of options of how they could get involved here at the high school, and really working not only with other students, but working with some fantastic adults who supervise those clubs and give students additional opportunities. So I would really encourage you to take a look again at the variety of things that the school offers so that they could reach out once they're here next year and learn more about those. But again, most of that information, as we've stated throughout the meeting, will be shared in the fall. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to join us. And again, stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You don't need to say
Thank
anything.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.